Well, hello everybody and welcome to Chef's Baking Blog. Now today I'm going to be making some garlic and thyme bread. I have a little hydroponic garden and it's been growing some thyme and I wanted to do something with that, so I looked for some recipes and I found a recipe on Good Food website excuse me, for garlic and thyme bread, and it's only a small loaf of bread, but it sounds ideal and it's very simple to make. So what I have is 250 grams of strong white flour and a teaspoon of salt, which I'm going to put into the flour now and just mix that around. I also have a teaspoon or 4 grams of fast acting yeast, which I'm going to put into 150 millilitres of warm water, and I'm going to also put in half a teaspoon of sugar into that water, give it a stir around and then leave it to start activating for at least 5 minutes. And I also have 1 tablespoon of chopped thyme, so that's a tablespoon after I've chopped it. You could use more, but thyme is very strong, so I'm only going to use a tablespoon. And I've also chopped 1 large clove of garlic, so they will go into the bread later on. So I'll be back with you in 5 minutes when our yeast is activated and we can go on to making the bread dough. Okay, so our yeast has started to activate and I'm going to pour that. I've made a well in the flour and I'm going to pour the yeast into the flour. And then I'm just going to push the flour over the top from around the edges and mix it with a spoon until it begins to come together. Now I should say that I have a little bit more water that I can add if I need to, but I've got 150 millilitres of water at the moment in this mixture, but flour tends to vary in how much water it absorbs, so sometimes you need to add a little bit more. And I'm going to get my hands in there. And this should be quite a stiff dough. That seems to have come together quite nicely without adding any more water. So what I'm going to do is put a very little amount of flour onto the work surface, and I'm going to knead this dough for 8 minutes. Okay, so that's the dough needed for 8 minutes. Now what I want to do is to flatten that out, and maybe a rolling pin will help with that a little bit. I just want to the shape doesn't matter at all. We just want to get a bit of a surface that we can sprinkle our garlic and thyme over. I think that's good enough. And then I'm going to just take the garlic and the thyme and sprinkle it all over. And again, it doesn't have to be uniform because we're going to knead it in. And it's difficult anyway with the garlic because it gets sticky when it's chopped. So we've got it reasonably well spread. And then I'm going to fold the bread in the dough, should I say, rather than the bread. And I'm going to knead it for a further 2 minutes, and I'm going to pick up those excess pieces and I'm going to knead it for 2 minutes to get that thyme and garlic well spread within the dough. So that's the dough, and as you can see the thyme and the garlic has been distributed quite nicely. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it into a lightly oiled bowl. So I'm going to rub the top and then turn it over and rub the bottom so that the whole surface is coated with a little bit of oil. I'm going to cover that up and I'm going to allow it to prove for 2 hours. So while it's proving, as it comes to the end of the proving, I'm going to preheat the oven to 220 Celsius, 200 Celsius with a fan, 430 Fahrenheit. I'm going to line a baking tray with some parchment paper, and then I'll be back with you and we will take the dough out of the proving bowl and we'll shape it and bake it. So I'll be back with you when this is doubled in size. Okay, so my dough has been resting or proving for 2 hours. So I'm going to simply turn it out onto a lightly floured work surface, knock it back, and I'm going to knead it for another couple of minutes. Okay, so I've kneaded that for a couple more minutes. Now I'm going to roll it. You could actually roll this out into a sort of baguette shape, as long as, you know, as you want, or you could even cut it up and make rolls of it. But I'm going to roll mine out into a sausage shape of about 5 or 6 inches long. As I say, this isn't a particularly large loaf. I'm sure you could double the recipe and make a £2 loaf in a loaf tin. And with that, just with that shape, I'm going to take a sharp knife and put 3 little cuts in it. Just slash it. Like that, maybe a 4th one. And then I'm going to put it on my baking tray. I'm going to leave it for 10 minutes. Just cover it with a clean towel and leave it for 10 minutes. So I'm back with you again, and I've let this rest for 10 minutes. I'm just going to lightly dust it with a little bit of flour on the top, like that. And as you can see, it has risen a little bit, and it will rise more in the oven. So I'm going to put it in the oven, bake it for 35 to 40 minutes. The way to test it is to turn it over and tap the underside. If it sounds hollow, then it will be done. And I'll take it out of the oven, put it onto a wire rack for it to cool down, and then I'll come back and show you the result. Okay, so I'm back with you, and our bread's out of the oven. It baked for about 37 minutes. Sounds nice and hollow underneath, and I've already had a bite, but I'll taste it again. It's crispy on the outside, nice and soft inside, with that garlic and thyme flavour. Tastes very, very good indeed. Ideal with butter and soup, maybe. If you do store it in an airtight container, the crust will go softer. It would still remain sort of thick and chewy, but softer. So this is a small loaf. I'm sure you could double up the recipe if you wanted to and make a £2 loaf or a larger loaf. But that's it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below the video and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on to get to the recipe. I'll also put a link below the video that will take you to the recipe, and I will be back with you with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.